My fiancée left me cold after draining my inheritance to open her dream boutique. Months passed before she returned, pleading for forgiveness. But by then, it was far too late. The decisions I made in the aftermath were irreversible. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and it all started 4 years ago during my last year in business school, where I met Daisy, my then 25-year-old girlfriend, who would eventually become my fiancée. Back then, to keep my finances afloat alongside my student loans, I held down a part-time job at a local coffee shop just off campus. It wasn't glamorous work. Latte art and espresso shots were a far cry from the corporate boardrooms I envisioned, but it helped cover rent and the occasional textbook. Daisy started showing up at the shop regularly. 3 times a week, like clockwork, she'd slide into the same corner seat with a stack of enormous art history books and highlighters in hand, surrounded by a jungle of sticky notes. She always ordered the same loose-leaf chamomile tea and made that one cup last the entire evening. After weeks of quietly watching her nurse that same tea from open to close, I couldn't resist anymore. "You know we offer free refills, right?" I remarked with a grin. Her eyes lifted from her book, clearly startled that someone had spoken to her. "Really? Even for tea?" she asked, half skeptical, half intrigued. That little exchange was our beginning, unexpected, effortless. I wasn't actively seeking a relationship. My mind was fully locked on finishing my degree and launching a stable career. Romance was somewhere buried behind financial forecasts and MBA deadlines. But Daisy had this quiet magnetism, something more than her unassuming beauty. Sure, she had that natural, no-makeup, bookish charm, but it was her enthusiasm that drew me in. The way her eyes sparkled when she talked about obscure Renaissance painters or dissected symbolism in frescoes most people had never even heard of. Her passion was electric. It made everything she said feel vital. Our first outing wasn't even meant to be a date. She casually asked if I wanted to check out a downtown gallery exhibit after my shift one Friday night. I figured, why not? It sounded better than enduring another night of my roommate's epic gaming sessions and leftover pizza. The exhibit was avant-garde to say the least, an entire collection built from discarded plastics and other found objects, all twisted into surreal installations. It wasn't my kind of art, not really. But I found myself captivated, not by the pieces themselves, but by Daisy. She walked me through every installation, explaining artistic influences, dissecting techniques, and offering critiques with the ease of someone deeply immersed in her world. That night, I didn't just see art. I saw her, and I was hooked. After graduation, I was fortunate enough to land a decent job at a financial consulting firm. The salary was competitive, though the hours were merciless. It wasn't unusual for me to pull 60, even 70-hour weeks. Meanwhile, Daisy was pursuing her master's degree in art history. She was brilliant, no question, but she hadn't quite figured out where she wanted that brilliance to take her. We moved in together about a year and a half into our relationship. Our apartment wasn't extravagant, a modest 2-bedroom in a respectable part of town, but it was ours. Since I earned more, we split the rent 60-40. I covered utilities, she handled groceries. It was a straightforward setup that kept things balanced and drama-free. Daisy often spoke of her dream, a boutique that fused vintage fashion with curated local artwork. Picture a place where a hand-stitched 1940s dress hangs next to an original painting from a local artist, she'd say, her face glowing with excitement. For a while, it was all conceptual, a beautiful but distant fantasy. She worked part-time at a museum gift shop, barely making enough to contribute to her share of the rent. Most evenings, she'd spread her ideas across our tiny dining table: sketches, floor plans, displays, branding concepts, and digital mock-ups. Her business plan was meticulous. She'd broken down supplier costs, outlined revenue models, and even projected seasonal inventory cycles. "I just need capital," she'd say, deflated. "No bank wants to gamble on someone like me without collateral or experience." And she was right. The numbers checked out, but banks aren't known for taking chances on untested entrepreneurs, especially ones with liberal arts degrees. On our 3rd anniversary, I proposed. We took a short trip to the mountains, and as the sun dipped behind the peaks, I asked her to marry me. The ring wasn't extravagant, but it was tasteful and elegant, something I'd saved months for. She cried when I slid it on her finger, and for the rest of the evening, she couldn't stop staring at how the diamond shimmered in the fading light. "I'm so ready to start our life together," she whispered. At the time, I believed we were aligned in our vision of the future. About 6 months into our engagement, my grandmother passed away. We weren't especially close, but she'd always expressed pride in my academic journey. In her will, she left me around $78,000 after taxes. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a respectable sum, enough to give me options. My initial plan was to invest the bulk of it into stocks or real estate, and maybe reserve a chunk for the wedding. Around that time, Daisy's boutique idea became more than idle musings. She started building elaborate mood boards, scouting potential retail spaces, and tweaking her business plan almost daily. It was clear the concept had become an obsession, and I couldn't ignore the fire in her eyes when she talked about it. One night, as we sat side by side on the couch flipping through one of her market analysis reports, I said, "What if I use part of the inheritance to get your boutique off the ground?" She blinked at me, stunned. "You're not joking?" she asked, voice trembling. I've reviewed your numbers. The plan is solid. You've got something real here. You just need the capital." She hesitated, biting her lip. "But that money was for your future, your investments." I took her hand. "This is an investment. In our future. In you." Over the next few weeks, we went into full startup mode. I looped in a friend from business school who specialized in retail startups. He combed through Daisy's proposal and suggested a few valuable improvements. We made a list of suppliers, negotiated starting orders, and mapped out a realistic timeline for launch. Eventually, we secured a small storefront in a neighborhood that was still affordable, but clearly on the upswing. Gentrification was slowly transforming the area, and foot traffic was increasing. It felt like a perfect opportunity. I contributed a total of $62,000, enough to cover the lease deposit, renovations, initial inventory, e-commerce site development, branding, marketing campaigns, and launch events. The place needed cosmetic improvements, but nothing major. Just fresh paint, new lighting, and some custom shelving. While I handled the contractor logistics and legal paperwork, Daisy poured her energy into product curation and interior design. Our roles meshed perfectly, her artistic eye balanced by my analytical approach. We even drafted a basic partnership agreement. Though she would be the face of the boutique, I'd remain a silent partner with a stake in any profits. It wasn't overly complex, but it was legally sound, ensuring both our interests were protected. The lease, the invoices, even the business license, they were all in my name. Not because I doubted Daisy, but because I understood the importance of structure in any venture. "Isn't this a bit much?" she asked as we sat down to sign the partnership agreement I'd drafted. I looked at her and said, "It's better to have it and not need it than to find ourselves needing it and not have it." My hope was that this document would remain buried in a drawer, gathering dust as we built something lasting. At the time, I couldn't have imagined just how important that one sheet of legalese would eventually become. The day we received the keys to the storefront, Daisy was practically floating. She danced around the vacant space like a child seeing snow for the first time, hands in the air, twirling between the walls with a disbelieving grin. "I can't believe this is actually happening," she kept repeating, tears welling in her eyes. "This is our future, Blake. We're really doing it." That was 8 months ago. The unraveling didn't happen in one fell swoop. It crept in quietly, almost invisibly at first. The first shift coincided with the arrival of Daisy's cousin Belle, who had recently relocated to our city. Belle had a presence that demanded attention, not in a warm or charismatic way, but in that confrontational, pseudo-woke manner that makes every conversation feel like a landmine. She was the type who weaponized vocabulary from social justice circles without grasping the underlying empathy or context. Everything was labeled toxic, problematic, or gaslighting. She wielded the word patriarchy with the frequency most people reserve for commas. I'll never forget our first dinner together. Belle arched a perfectly manicured eyebrow and asked, "So, "You're bankrolling this business?" In a tone that dripped with condescension, as if I'd just confessed to something sordid. I corrected her calmly. "We're building it together." She exchanged a glance with Daisy that I couldn't quite decipher. "Just make sure you're not unintentionally creating a power imbalance in your relationship paradigm," she added. I nearly spit out my water. Relationship paradigm? Who actually talks like that? Daisy jumped in quickly. "We're good. Blake's super supportive." Belle didn't let up. "Support is the bare minimum, cousin. History is full of men controlling women through financial dependence. Just something to think about." I laughed it off. Every family has that one eccentric relative, right? But Belle didn't just fade into the background. Quite the opposite. She became a near-constant presence during the boutique's setup, inserting herself into creative decisions and offering unsolicited advice. Her version of creative direction mostly involved pushing millennial pink walls and plastering motivational quotes in cursive fonts across every available surface. She and Daisy were suddenly inseparable. While arranging shelving one afternoon, Belle suggested, "We should create an empowerment corner, a space where women can feel seen and celebrated for their journeys." I stared at her. "What does that even mean?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "It means merchandising with intention, Blake," she said with a patronizing smile, as though she were explaining the concept of breathing. "It's about cultivating a safe space where marginalized voices can express themselves through ethical consumer choices." "So, slogan t-shirts?" I replied. Belle sighed as if I'd just broken her favorite crystal. "This is exactly the kind of male energy that stifles creativity in inclusive spaces." The worst part? Daisy, who would have once rolled her eyes at Belle's self-righteous monologues, actually nodded. "She kind of has a point, Blake. We should be more deliberate about our brand message." That moment hit me like a splash of cold water. The way Daisy said "we," she didn't mean her and me anymore. She meant her and Belle. Belle's influence only grew stronger from there. She dropped by our apartment almost daily, always accompanied by some new opportunity for Daisy. A networking brunch, a pop-up collaboration, or a Women in Business seminar that charged $499 for access to panel discussions, led by Instagram influencers with vague credentials. "It's an investment in my growth," Daisy would insist whenever I questioned the value of these events. Belle had a way of making even the most overpriced, surface-level workshops sound like they were part of a grand feminist uprising. She talked about unlocking one's divine potential through financial abundance mindsets and manifesting the inner business goddess with a straight face. "You have to surround yourself with people who elevate your feminine energy," she told Daisy over brunch one Sunday while I sat 2 feet away. "Some people's energy just holds you back from your full potential." Her eyes flicked toward me as she said it. Then she suggested Daisy start selling affirmation cards at the checkout counter. Things like, "My womb wisdom knows prosperity," or "I receive wealth with every breath." I waited for Daisy to laugh. She didn't. She actually pulled out her phone and started jotting down the idea. That's when the boutique began to shift, both in tone and in mission. We had named it Retro Perspective, a clever play on nostalgia and modern identity that Daisy had come up with. The launch was modest but promising. No instant windfall, but steady traffic and a growing customer base. Daisy had a great sense of style and an easy rapport with shoppers. I kept my job at the firm, but handled the back-end operations during evenings and weekends. Inventory tracking, updating the site, managing the books and taxes. About 3 months in, subtle changes began to surface. Daisy created a separate Instagram account for the boutique, which at first made sense. Branding is important. But soon, the content became less about the clothes and more about her. Every post featured her in flattering lighting, striking poses next to racks of vintage denim, writing captions filled with buzzwords about women supporting women and attracting financial prosperity. Her wardrobe changed too, not in a bad way, but it became hyper-stylized. Everything matched the boutique's aesthetic. Chunky earrings, pastel jumpsuits, printed scarves, the kind of accessories she used to poke fun at. Her phone was always buzzing with alerts. When I asked, she'd wave it off. Just networking. Brand stuff. Phrases like collaboration, content strategy, and brand engagement became regular parts of her vocabulary. Even our mutual friends started to notice the shift. "Is Daisy okay?" my friend Drew asked during poker night, eyeing me carefully. "She seems different." "She's just really busy with the store," I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "We've seen her Instagram," Drew's wife Jen chimed in. "Like, nonstop. She's always posting something." I nodded, unsure of what else to say. What could I say? Soon Daisy was socializing exclusively with a new group. Small business owners, lifestyle influencers, women who called each other boss babe without irony, and filled their feeds with color-coded planners and soft-focus vision boards. The boutique was evolving into something I hadn't signed up for. One evening, I came home to find Daisy filming herself unboxing a shipment of merchandise. She was speaking into the camera like a TV host, describing each piece in great detail, her tone rehearsed and polished. And I realized something that chilled me. She was no longer doing this with me. She was performing for an audience that didn't include me at all. "Today we're unboxing our latest ethical linen drop," Daisy announced cheerfully into her ring light, hands gracefully lifting folded garments from eco-friendly packaging. Each piece is sourced from empowered female artisans across the globe. She paused for dramatic effect, then smiled at her phone screen. I waited until she finished the take before I cut in. "You do realize those empowered artisans are from a bulk supplier you found on Alibaba, right? The factory pays workers maybe $3 a day." Her expression instantly soured. "You're ruining my content," she snapped, glaring. "I'm stating a fact," I replied calmly. "If you're going to advertise something as ethical, it should actually be ethical. Otherwise, it's misleading at best." "It's aspirational messaging," she said, making air quotes around the phrase. "Bell says consumers respond more to story than to cold data." "That's called false advertising, not storytelling," I shot back. "There's a word for it when the narrative doesn't match reality." Her eyes narrowed. "God, why are you always trying to mansplain my business to me?" I blinked, genuinely stunned. "Mansplain? Daisy, we built this business together. When did offering feedback turn into some sexist power move?" She rolled her eyes. "You wouldn't get it. Bell says men are conditioned to insert themselves into women's success stories. It's how they're socialized, always trying to claim credit." And there it was. I wasn't just arguing with Daisy anymore. I was arguing with Bell by proxy. Daisy had stopped thinking independently and was now parroting Bell's philosophies like gospel. I didn't hear her voice anymore. Just Bell's, filtered through hashtags and pseudo-enlightened rhetoric. Bell was constantly there, hovering just outside the frame, reinforcing every new layer of this transformation. "You're finally vibrating at your authentic frequency," she'd tell Daisy, with all the sincerity of a yoga instructor pushing overpriced chakra stones. Meanwhile, I was becoming invisible. Daisy no longer consulted me on any business decisions. She began scheduling creative meetings for times she knew I'd be stuck at work. Retro perspective, once our joint labor of love, was now my boutique, whenever she referred to it. Mine as in hers, not ours. It wasn't just our relationship that was fracturing. The boutique itself was sliding off course. Under Bell's constant input, Daisy had shifted the product lineup. Gone were the thoughtfully curated vintage garments, and in came flashy, mass-produced items stamped with vague, empowering slogans. Things like "Rise and Radiate" and "Feminine Fire" emblazoned across cheap crop tops. The markups were ridiculous, the substance gone. The soul of the boutique, the blend of artistry and nostalgia that had given us identity, was replaced with a brand built on buzzwords. Sales were unpredictable. Big spikes would come when a post caught traction on social media, but those bursts were followed by days of near silence. I brought this up one evening after analyzing our monthly reports. We need consistent foot traffic, not just digital hype. The vintage denim line still brings in our best profit margins. Maybe feature that more prominently? "That's such outdated thinking," she replied with a dismissive wave. Belle's friend Monica made 6 figures in passive income just from Instagram engagement. Monica sells detox tea and butt-lifting leggings, I said flatly. That's not even close to our demographic. You just don't get it, Daisy sighed. It's all about brand evolution now. Personality-driven marketing. You're stuck in old-school retail logic. What used to be a boutique with character was morphing into a carbon copy of every trendy Instagram shop. Neon wall signs with hashtags like Boss Energy, overpriced soy candles named Feminist Rage and Patriarchy Tears, and cheap tank tops marked up 400% because they came with a quote about divine feminine power. Customers noticed, and they weren't impressed. Our reviews began to reflect the shift. Loyal customers who'd supported us from day one left polite but pointed feedback, concerned about the boutique's new identity, its pricing, and its gimmicky direction. Daisy didn't care. That's just negativity, she said. Vibrational clutter. When a local women's entrepreneurship group reached out to propose a partnership, offering to feature some of our original vintage pieces at an upcoming networking event, I was excited. It was great exposure, aligned perfectly with our roots, and it was the kind of collaboration that built meaningful community ties. I turned them down, Daisy said over dinner one night, barely looking up from her phone. What? Why? That was a golden opportunity. Belle looked into the founder, she replied casually. Apparently, she once liked a tweet that was borderline problematic, something about cultural appropriation in fashion. We can't affiliate with that kind of toxicity. My jaw dropped. Did you even confirm this? Or are we canceling business partners now based on liked tweets from 5 years ago? I don't need to verify someone's lived experience, she said coldly. Belle's instincts are usually right. I was losing her, not just as a partner in love, but as a collaborator with critical thinking skills. I tried confronting her one evening. I feel like you're pushing me out. From the business. From us. You're being paranoid, she said without even glancing up. I'm expanding the brand. It's marketing, Blake. You wouldn't understand the creative process. I let it slide. I shouldn't have. The crash came on an otherwise normal Tuesday. I got home from work to find her sitting at the kitchen table, phone in hand, face expressionless. We need to talk, she said, eyes finally meeting mine. My stomach dropped. Those 4 words are never a good sign. The engagement ring sat on the table between us like a loaded weapon. She'd taken it off. That tiny detail said everything. I've outgrown this relationship, she began, voice robotic, as if rehearsed. I'm in a different phase now, a higher frequency. I need a partner who understands my journey. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. What are you saying? Is this about the boutique? Because if you're stressed, we can... Not everything is about the boutique, Blake, she snapped, cutting me off. This is emotional evolution. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I said, my voice tightening. She sighed dramatically, like I was a first grader struggling with multiplication. I need someone who's aligned with my energy. Someone who has ambition, vision. You're just comfortable, and I'm not meant for comfort. Comfortable? I repeated. You mean the comfort of me funding your boutique? That kind of comfortable? She stood up. This is what I mean. You always reduce everything to money. There's more to life than spreadsheets. And there's more to life than buzzwords and Instagram captions, I replied. Her eyes flashed. Belle was right about you. You're intimidated by strong women. I laughed bitterly. You mean Belle? The feminist who lives off her parents at 32? That Belle? That's your guru now? At least she encourages my goals instead of trying to manipulate them with money, Daisy said sharply, her voice rising. Manipulate? I finance those dreams, I shot back. And you've never let me forget it, she snapped, grabbing her purse with sudden finality. I'm going to stay with Belle for a while. I need to realign myself, clear my energy. What about the ring? I asked, nodding toward the diamond still resting on the kitchen table between us like a broken promise. She paused at the door, glanced at it, then shrugged. Keep it. It was never really my style anyway. With that, she left. I stayed seated, staring at the ring. But I wasn't just mourning the relationship. Breakups are common. Painful, but familiar. This felt like something deeper. Like witnessing someone I love morph into a stranger. Someone who could discard everything we'd built and retell the entire story in a way that cast her as the brave survivor and me as the oppressive villain. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Drew. Just saw Daisy's Instagram story. You doing okay? I hadn't been online all day. Opening Instagram, I saw the post that made his message click. Daisy had uploaded a picture of herself gazing out of Belle's apartment window, the city skyline blurred behind her. The caption read, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what no longer serves your highest self." Self-love. New beginnings. Belle was quick to comment, "So proud of you for choosing you, Queen. Never let a man clip your wings when you're ready to soar." Over 24 likes already. A handful of mutual friends had responded with heart emojis, supportive gifs, or the usual Yas Queen affirmations. I closed the app and filled a glass with water, heart pounding. This wasn't just going to blow over. By morning, it had escalated. My phone lit up with notifications. Daisy had posted a carousel on her profile. 6 photos of her elegantly posed around the boutique, looking contemplative and composed. The caption read, "Leveling up means letting go. So grateful for the path I'm on. Built this from a whisper of a dream, and now it's a reality. No one believed in me, but here I am. Proof that women can thrive without needing a man to back them." So self-made, jar boss babe, jar trust the process. Each photo was carefully curated. Daisy is standing beneath our boutique sign. Daisy holding a coffee mug that read, "Empowered women empower women." Daisy was wistfully gazing out the storefront window like a model in a lifestyle ad. The comments flooded in. "So proud of you, girl. This is what strength looks like." "Yes, Queen, never dim your shine." Belle chimed in again. "This is what happens when you stop letting toxic masculinity control your destiny. Watching you rise is such a gift." I stared at my phone in disbelief. Self-made? I had signed the checks for every item in that store. The shelves, the lighting, the initial inventory, the marketing materials. Every dollar of startup cash had come from me. I called her, straight to voicemail. I sent a text. "What the hell is going on?" No reply. Over the next few days, the posts kept coming. More vague quotes about rising above negativity. Empowerment slogans layered over filtered selfies. The implication was crystal clear. She had clawed her way to success despite the dead weight of a partner holding her back. Then I got a message from Nate, another mutual friend. He sent a screenshot from Daisy's private Instagram story, one I had been intentionally excluded from. Across a moody black and white photo of her journal, she'd overlaid the words, "Financial abuse is real. Just because there are no bruises doesn't mean there's no harm. Grateful to be taking my power back." Nate's message followed. "Dude, what? You need to see what she's saying." He sent another batch of screenshots, this time from a group chat. Apparently, Daisy and Belle had been actively dissecting our relationship, turning it into a case study in toxic behavior. Belle had written, "Classic narcissist strategy. He used money as leverage. Keeping you dependent is a form of control. Financial prison is still prison." Daisy responded with a string of clapping emojis. Another message followed from her. "He always tried to override my decisions, said I wasn't thinking things through, just because I trusted my intuition more than his precious spreadsheets." The conversation got worse. Belle advised Daisy to maybe talk to an advocate, because what I'd done sounded like economic abuse. Nate, bless him, called them out. "I've known Blake for years. This doesn't line up. It sounds like revisionist nonsense." They kicked him from the chat. And soon after, my other friendships started cracking. Some people stopped replying to texts. Others sent half-hearted "hope you're okay" messages, clearly not wanting to choose sides but already retreating. A few actually messaged to ask, "Hey, is it true what Daisy said?" I had to ask Drew, the only friend who'd still meet up in person. We sat at a bar, drinks in hand, heavy silence between us. What exactly is she saying? I finally asked. Drew shifted uncomfortably. It's not good, man. She's telling people you were controlling with money, that you tried to take credit for the boutique, that you got jealous when it started doing well and threatened to pull your funding if she didn't obey. I stared at him. And people actually buy this? Some do, he said. You know how it goes. It's an easy story to latch onto. Belle's adding fuel too, saying you made Daisy ask permission to spend, that you blocked her from partnerships because you were threatened. That's not just false. It's the opposite of what happened, I protested. I wanted her to succeed. I invested because I believed in her. Drew nodded. I know, but man, you're silent. And she's spinning this whole narrative daily. In social media land, silence equals guilt. He was right. I'd kept quiet, assuming it would blow over, that eventually people would see the truth. But now my phone was buzzing again, from an unknown number. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the green button. I had no idea who it might be. Another friend with questions? Someone trying to confirm the gossip? Or worse, someone who had already decided I was the villain in Daisy's carefully curated tragedy. I answered anyway. Is this Blake? A woman's voice asked. Yeah, who's this? My name's Clarissa. I'm with the Small Business Owners Collective. We spoke briefly when your boutique was first getting off the ground. I remembered her, friendly, sharp, and enthusiastic about supporting local businesses. Right. Clarissa, what's going on? There was a pause. I wanted to reach out because we've been seeing some concerning posts tied to retro perspective, and your name has come up in a few discussions. I thought it was only fair to hear your side. I stood there in stunned silence. It had spread beyond just our friends. No, we people in the community were getting wind of it. This wasn't just social drama anymore. It was starting to affect the business itself, my reputation, my professional life. I thanked her for calling, did my best to explain things calmly, though I could hear the tension in my own voice. When we hung up, I realized this wasn't a storm I could just wait out. Daisy wasn't venting privately. She was crafting an entire identity out of this, one where she was the underdog who overcame my supposed tyranny to emerge victorious, and people were eating it up. By that evening, I'd gotten 2 more messages, one from a local influencer we'd once courted for a collaboration, saying she was distancing from the brand, and another from a boutique supplier expressing hesitation about continuing our contract until things settled down. This wasn't just about my name anymore. It was about the boutique itself. The very thing I helped build was now being used as a platform to destroy me. The more I thought about it, the more surreal it all felt. Just months ago, Daisy was leaning against me on the couch, talking through floor plans, excitedly showing me mock-ups for logos. She'd called me her rock, her partner, the only one who ever believed in her. Now I was being painted as the oppressor, the controlling financier who stifled her creativity, the abusive partner who weaponized money. That night, I opened our legal documents, the agreement she signed, the one she once called unnecessary overkill. I read through it slowly, highlighting the clauses that protected my share, that established the boutique as a joint investment, not a personal empire. It gave me no comfort. I didn't want to enforce anything yet, but it reminded me I wasn't crazy. I had receipts, paper trails, witnesses. I also had the truth. But I was learning that truth alone wasn't enough in an age where likes and hashtags shaped reality faster than facts ever could. I stepped outside the office and took the call, unsure who would be on the other end. "Blake, it's Robert," the voice said. It took me a second to place it. Robert, Daisy's father. That was unexpected. Daisy's parents had always been the grounded, reasonable type, salt-of-the-earth people who believed in hard work and humility. They seemed to be the exact opposite of the woman Daisy was becoming, or at least pretending to be. "I owe you an apology," he said after a long sigh. His voice sounded older, wearier than I remembered. "I've seen the things Daisy's been putting online, and I know the truth. We raised her better than this." His words caught me off guard. I'd never imagined getting a call like this. "Thanks, Robert. That means more than you know." "We're devastated. Not just because the engagement's off, but because of how she's conducting herself. You were the best thing that ever happened to her. And I'm just ashamed. You don't need to take responsibility for her actions, I said, trying to offer him a little peace. She's an adult. She made her own choices. Maybe so, he said, but someone ought to say something. She won't listen to us anymore. Says we're relics from a patriarchal past or something. I don't even know what that means anymore. Bells filled her head with all kinds of nonsense. We talked for a few minutes more, Robert alternating between guilt and grief. He was torn, still a father defending his child, but one who couldn't ignore what was plainly wrong. Before I let you go, he said finally, her mother wanted me to tell you something. She thinks you should cut contact, block her, everywhere. This is going to get worse before it gets better. That night, I followed through. I opened the filing cabinet and pulled everything out. Bank records, tax forms, invoices, contracts, legal paperwork. Every receipt tied to Retro Perspective was in my name. Every transfer, every dollar. The business license, the commercial lease, and the invoices from contractors and suppliers. The partnership agreement we both signed, the same one she'd once called overkill. All signed by me, all paid from my accounts. I made an appointment first thing the next morning. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense guy named Harris, sifted through the paperwork. You're in a better position than most, he said, flipping through the documentation. Your name is all over this. Business registration, property lease, the works. She can't just wipe you out of the picture. What are my options? I asked. Several, he said. You could force a sale and split the profits. You could offer to buy her out, although I doubt she'll agree given her current mindset. Or you could assert your rights as a partner and assume control of day-to-day operations. You've got the legal right. I exhaled slowly. Let's start simple. Send a formal letter. Lay out my investments, my legal standing. Make it clear I'm not going away. Good choice, he said. Sometimes that's enough to shake some sense into them. But it wasn't. Daisy didn't respond directly. Instead, I received a letter from her new attorney, someone Belle had connected her with. The letter was a masterclass in ideological posturing. It accused me of attempting to reclaim patriarchal control over a woman-owned business and weaponizing financial systems to suppress female autonomy. My lawyer chuckled as he read it. This isn't a legal rebuttal, he said. This is a Twitter thread disguised as a cease and desist. We escalated. We filed a formal complaint, submitted every shred of proof I had, and requested injunctive relief. Essentially, a legal block on Daisy making any business decisions without my consent. We had the documents. We had the paper trail. What we didn't have was the public sympathy, thanks to her ongoing online campaign. Daisy's Instagram had become a shrine to empowerment quotes and curated victimhood. Every post oozed with vague references to shadowy male oppressors. Belle liked and commented on nearly everyone, praising her courage, urging her to reclaim her truth. Yet something curious was happening in the background. While their online following seemed strong, the boutique was crumbling. Sales were down. Inventory was stacking up. Through our shared cloud accounting software, which she hadn't thought to revoke my access to, I watched the numbers fall apart. Expenses were climbing. Revenue was shrinking. The biggest red flag? She'd invested thousands in a custom line of empowerment t-shirts. Slogans like "Smash the Patriarchy" and "The Future is Female" printed on cheaply made fabric. They weren't selling. Meanwhile, the vintage pieces, especially the denim, which had always been our top-performing category, were gathering dust in the back. She hired a social media consultant, another Belle recommendation, at $75 an hour. Despite all the reels and viral attempts, engagement wasn't converting into purchases. Then came the photo shoot for their spring launch. Nearly $3,000 for a day of stylists, props, and camera crews. Zero net return. Customers were noticing too. The boutique's reviews began shifting. Longtime patrons mentioned the vibe had changed. One comment read, "I came in looking for a cool vintage jacket and ended up getting cornered about decolonizing my wardrobe. Just let me shop." Another said, I wanted jeans, not a lecture. Do better. It was like watching a house fall in slow motion, one I helped build. 2 months into this quiet war, my lawyer called. She wants to meet. No lawyers, just the two of you. Says she wants to talk about ending this amicably. I was skeptical, but curious. I agreed. We met at a neutral spot, a quiet cafe on the other side of town. Daisy looked different. The polished influencer image was still there, but strained. Her makeup was thinner. Her eyes were shadowed by fatigue. She sat across from me, back straight, trying to maintain poise. "Thanks for coming," she said. "What do you want, Daisy?" She sighed, the confidence cracking. "The boutique is struggling. I need additional capital. I thought maybe, considering everything we've been through, you'd be willing to reinvest, just to help stabilize things." I blinked. She was serious. I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're unbelievable. After dragging my name through the dirt, implying I was abusive, turning our friends against me. You want more of my money?" Her gaze dropped. People say things when they're upset. It wasn't personal. "Wasn't personal," I echoed. "You've painted me as a villain in front of hundreds of people." "That's just social media," she shrugged, like it meant nothing. "It's not real." "Tell that to my parents," I said, my voice low but steady, "who've been fielding concerned calls from their friends. Or my boss, who pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay at home. It's felt pretty real to us." Daisy looked down at her lap, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "I'm sorry if that happened," she muttered, not quite meeting my eyes. "But I need help. The boutique is everything to me." I let out a dry laugh. "Funny. I thought I used to be everything to you." She blinked, as if not expecting me to say that out loud. "Things change," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. "To save the business? To protect your image? Or just to keep pretending I never existed?" She looked at me, eyes wide and tired. "You're really going to shut it all down after everything I've poured into it?" "You mean everything I paid for?" I shot back. "The business you've been publicly claiming you built on your own while throwing me under the bus?" Daisy had no response. For once, she didn't have a comeback or a quote from Bell or a polished slogan to toss at me. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, leaning forward, locking eyes with her. "You have 2 choices. Option 1, we put the boutique up for sale. We pay off whatever debts remain, and we split what's left based on our original partnership agreement. You remember that agreement, right? The one that heavily favors me because I fronted all the capital?" She nodded slowly, clearly dreading what came next. "Or option 2, you go public and correct the narrative. You acknowledge that I funded the business, that I was an equal partner in building it. You buy out my share, on a payment plan, with interest, and stop the smear campaign. No more vague shade, no more lies, just the truth." Daisy's lip trembled. "I can't afford to buy you out." I nodded, unsurprised. "Then I guess we're going with option 1. Panic flickered across her face. "You'd really shut it down? After everything?" I didn't flinch. "Especially after everything." The next day, Daisy's entire online presence went eerily silent. No new posts, no stories, no curated selfies with motivational captions. Just silence. It lasted 3 full days before Retro Perspective's Instagram finally posted a stark black square with white text. The caption read, "Statement from Retro Perspective. In the interest of transparency, I'd like to clarify some prior statements. This business was made possible through significant financial support from my former partner, Blake. Claims suggesting I built this enterprise alone were incorrect and misleading. I sincerely apologize for any confusion or misconceptions." It wasn't a full admission, not by a long shot, but it was something. I later learned that my lawyer had helped draft it as part of the settlement terms. The arrangement was simple and clean. Daisy would remain the face of the brand, running day-to-day operations. I would retain 51% ownership, stay behind the scenes, and receive monthly buyout payments for the next 5 years with interest. And most importantly, she would stop all negative references, direct or indirect, about me. The comments on that post were a mixed bag: confusion, cautious support, awkward silence. A few followers expressed disappointment. A few praised her honesty. But what stood out most was the absence of Belle. Not a single comment, not even a like. Turns out, Belle had her own mess to deal with. Someone, definitely not me, had compiled a full dossier of her worst social media moments from over the years. The kind of posts that age like milk. Racist jokes disguised as edgy humor. Photos of offensive Halloween costumes. Tone-deaf tweets mocking mental illness, marginalized communities, and serious social issues. It was a greatest hits of performative hypocrisy. That compilation spread fast. Screenshots were shared through group chats, DMS, and niche forums. Suddenly, Belle's halo as a thought leader cracked wide open. Her image as a fearless feminist collapsed under the weight of her own contradictions. Later, I found out it was Nate who put the whole thing together. Over lunch, he explained why. She's been playing woke while spewing some of the most toxic garbage I've ever read. It was time someone pulled back the curtain. The list included gems like Belle joking about trauma survivors, wearing a war bonnet at a music festival while claiming it was a spiritual accessory, and a blog post where she claimed poor people just needed to visualize money harder. All this while living rent-free in her parents' luxury condo downtown. The final nail? A series of leaked DMs in which she berated a follower who questioned one of her takes. Maybe if you weren't so broke and bitter, you wouldn't be jealous of empowered women, she'd written. So much for sisterhood. The fallout was brutal. Belle lost thousands of followers overnight. Brand partnerships evaporated. She issued a half-hearted apology and then disappeared from Instagram entirely. And when things got really ugly, she blocked Daisy, cut ties, threw her under the bus faster than a PR crisis consultant could say, damage control. Drew sent me screenshots from a group chat where people were speculating about Belle's sudden silence. Someone asked if she was still collaborating with Daisy. Belle's response was ice cold. I don't associate with dishonest businesses. I was misled about Retroperspective's founding story and cannot, in good conscience, remain involved. She rewrote her role in the drama instantly, painting herself as a victim of Daisy's deception, rather than the puppet master she'd actually been. Classic Belle. Meanwhile, the guy Daisy had been seeing, the wealthy art collector she met through boutique circles, quietly ghosted her once he realized she wasn't the self-made boss she'd portrayed. Turns out he wanted a power couple, not a partner with financial obligations and a crumbling reputation. About a month after everything unraveled, one of our mutual friends, Freya, reached out. We met for coffee and sat across from each other in the same spot where Daisy had once asked for more money. I owe you an apology, Freya said, stirring her drink slowly. I believed everything Daisy posted. I never asked for your side. That wasn't fair. What changed your mind? I asked. Freya sighed. I saw her at a networking event last week. She was telling some new guy the same story, how she built the business from scratch with nothing but grit and ambition. Someone mentioned your name, and she brushed it off like you were a jealous ex trying to steal credit. I knew then. I remembered you two planning it together. Freya wasn't the only one. Over the next few weeks, more friends reached out. Some offered awkward apologies. Others just started texting again like nothing had happened. I didn't blame them. People avoid conflict by nature. It was easier to nod along with the person making the most noise. But now that Belle was gone, the boyfriend had bolted, and Daisy's support network was evaporating. Her shiny facade was starting to crack. Her curated Instagram life was exposed for what it really was, a carefully filtered illusion. Most of the so-called boss babe collective eventually drifted off to the next shiny narrative, some new woman rebranding herself as a phoenix rising from metaphorical ashes. Daisy faded into the background. Last I heard, she was staying on a photographer's couch, still managing the boutique, but now without the social media circus. The applause had quieted. The spotlight had moved on. Her once buzzing Instagram quieted. Watching the boutique gradually return to its original concept was oddly satisfying. Gone were the empowerment corners with overpriced candles and empty slogans. Vintage jackets reclaimed prime display space. Levi's were back up front. Sales began recovering as Daisy refocused on real business instead of the illusion of running one. 6 months after the fallout, I ran into her parents downtown. Her mom gave me a teary hug. "I'm so sorry about everything," she whispered. "We raised her better." "It's not your fault," I told her sincerely. "How is she?" "Humbled," her mother said. "Back to reality, especially since her cousin moved on." They asked polite questions about my life, my job, whether I was dating. Courteous conversation, though unspoken, was the fact that their daughter nearly erased me from the business I built and slandered me publicly to do it. I redirected the monthly payments she owed into something more fulfilling. A small business investment fund for real entrepreneurs. I even created an anonymous scholarship for students studying retail innovation. I stayed hands-off with the boutique. My lawyer handled any necessary contact. 8 months post-breakup, I was out with a colleague whose partner ran a business incubator. "Blake's got a good eye for viable concepts," he told her. "We're looking for mentors," she said, handing me a card. "Would you be interested?" I agreed. Later, I met with students, sharing grounded advice on business. Avoid chasing vanity metrics. Prioritize profit over performance. I never mentioned Daisy or retro perspective. Just taught the principles she once valued, before the likes mattered more than the ledgers. The engagement ring? Locked away in a safe deposit box. Not as a memento, but a lesson. When someone reveals who they are, believe them the first time. I moved on. Got promoted. Started seeing someone who knows the difference between partnership and being a wallet. Someone who believes in building something real, not just looking the part. Word got around that Daisy tried to offload excess boutique inventory on Craigslist. The infamous "future is female" tote bags didn't exactly sell like hotcakes. Apparently, customers prefer quality over buzzwords. She still posts occasionally. Sparse, mundane. The engagement is a fraction of what it once was. The algorithm, unforgiving. Without drama, she lost relevance. Her stories now show clothes, not filtered selfies or generic quotes. Real progress, maybe. That chapter of my life closed with an expensive lesson. There's a difference between investing in a dream and subsidizing someone's illusion. I just wish I'd realized what I was bankrolling before the checks cleared. At least this time, I kept the receipts.